Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina. I am the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a not-for-profit organisation. Our purpose is to help fellow not-for-profits leverage the digital world to positively impact their communities. The digital world is expanding beyond IT, software, hardware, and digital marketing to new innovative service delivery and measuring social impact. Connecting Up believes that not-for-profits with the right tools and skills can and do achieve great things for their communities. We have a long history of affordable software, hardware, educational events, and group consulting. We partner with over 40 organisations to deliver high-quality products and services specifically meeting the unique needs of the not-for-profit sector. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar Using LinkedIn as a Personal Branding Tool, which will be presented by Simone Douglas from Social Media AOK. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you have any questions during the session, please also type it into the questions box and Simone will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience possible. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you within 2 business days after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. That's all from me for now. I'll pass it over to Simone to get things started. Thanks, Simone.
All right, so today we're going to cover off on using LinkedIn as a personal branding tool. It's one of my favorite platforms and it's one that we use quite a bit for generating business inquiries and new referral relationships, so something that's really important in the not-for-profit space. But we're going to start off by just running through what social selling really is, which at the end of the day is just taking the pitch component out of sales, which is something that's actually really important, and creating conversations about your products, your services that in turn create opportunities. So it's important to understand from that perspective that if I can get this to go the right direction. Okay. So it's important to understand that it's an art form. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make with LinkedIn when it comes to using it is that they leap straight to premature solicitation. And what I mean by that is that they send someone a connection request. I accept that connection request, and within a minute and a half, I get this lovely, carefully worded 2-page sales email, which is telling me how it's going to solve all of my problems from their perspective, or telling me about a great opportunity for my business. And the issue with that is that you haven't actually built a relationship with me, and it's highly unlikely that I'm going to then engage you in conversation. So it's good to understand that more than 74% of business-to-business buyers conduct more than half their research online before making a purchase or contacting the salesperson or the organisation. So what does that mean in the not-for-profit space? The reality is that if your personal profile is not fully optimized and geared towards your ideal stakeholders or customers, then it's likely that opportunities are going to pass you by. So, the reality is in this modern day and age, your LinkedIn profile is a little bit like your online dating profile for business. So it's really important that you have it fully set up and that you're making the most of creating those opportunities for yourself. So we also know that 78% of social sellers outsell in comparison to colleagues who don't use social media. And that's simply because they're maximizing their personal brand exposure. So the more places that you can be found, the more likely it is that you're going to be found. And it's important that you have a strategy behind the types of content that you put on your profile, and also the types of content that you engage with or that you share. So in respect to that, you'll find that when you do that really effectively, that you create more and more social selling opportunities. And one of the things that you can actually do, which we'll do a little bit further through in the webinar, is check out your social selling index, which will give you an idea of just how fleshed out your LinkedIn profile is. Okay, so you're more likely, if you're using your LinkedIn profile properly, to reach your sales KPIs and quotas, but this comes down to, again, being found in LinkedIn search results. So a little bit later, I'm going to run through how you optimize your profile and exactly what you need to do to make sure that you're appearing in people's feeds when they're looking for your type of organization. Okay. And it's important that you connect to as many people as humanly possible. So often I get asked the question about what's the right connection strategy. So is it that I should only connect to people that I know really well, or people that I've done business with, or should I just connect to everybody? And there's really no right or wrong. It often comes down to the different personality types and what you're comfortable with. So my general rule of thumb is I will connect to anybody on LinkedIn that sends me a connection request that either now or sometime in the next 15 years may have the capacity to need my products or services, or be able to refer me to someone who may need them, which pretty much means I'll connect to anyone. Generally, I'll only connect to direct competitors locally here in South Australia if I've met them and I like them, because it's always good to have good, solid peer-to-peer networks. But I also have a lot of connections to people in digital marketing in the US, in Canada, and in England, because that means that I am ahead of the game when new trends in our industry come through, because they generally roll out of America before they hit Australia. Okay. The more people that you're connected to on LinkedIn, the easier it is going to be for you to make new connections. So it becomes quite important that you're maximizing those opportunities. Oh, why does that keep doing that? Sorry, guys, give me 2 seconds. Right. Okay, so all right. So basically, what you're trying to do is make a favorable impression. And you do that through the introductions and having the right connections, having your summary fully fleshed out, but also making sure that you have recommendations and things on your profile. Because these days they've done the research, and typically in the business to business space, which is where most of you guys exist, 5.4 people are involved in decision-making processes, particularly around tenders or grant applications and things like that. So another thing that it's good to be aware of is when you are putting in proposals and things, or starting on new projects, it's really important to do your research on LinkedIn and find out exactly who else is in the organisation that you can connect to. And this is so that they can then see content that you have specifically selected that showcases the scope and scale of your organisation to be the best choice for the project that you're looking at. So what I mean by that is, let's pretend for a minute that it was some kind of an employment contract and you were a disability employment services provider. Then you would make sure that there were lots of case studies or articles from your website that were included on your LinkedIn profile talking about really good client outcomes for those kinds of projects, because that's going to cast you in a favourable light if somebody looking at that kind of project then goes and looks at your profile. Okay, so the reality is that it takes less than 2/10 of a second for an online visitor to form a first opinion of your personal brand. And it takes just another 2.6 seconds for that viewer's eyes to concentrate in a way that reinforces that first impression, which effectively means you have 2/10 of a second to make that good first impression. Now, the reality is, in that period of time, I'm really going to just take in your headline and probably your profile photo. So your profile photo actually becomes critical in terms of that personal brand perception. So there are a couple of things to bear in mind with that. There is a platform called Photo Feeler. So what Photo Feeler does is it allows you to load different photos up and put your what's what I'm looking for, job title on there, and real human beings will vote as to how likable, influential, and competent you're perceived based on your photo. But I've also done some studies, and the reality is that smiling faces online make a more positive first impression. So it's important to consider that in your profile photo, you want to be smiling. The golden rule with that is you don't want to be American stock photo smiling necessarily, because in Australia that tends to scream marketing. But they say that just showing just the right amount of teeth is good because it makes you seem more approachable. So the other thing to make sure is that your profile photo is a good reflection of your personal brand. So ideally, if you have a team photo or a photo on the website of your organisation, then in reality it should be the same photo that is your profile photo. You also want to make sure that you're not necessarily doing putting things up there that cast you in the wrong light. So a selfie taken, up against a wall or in the bathrooms because the lighting was good is not the answer. These are not real life examples that are up on your screen now, but I've seen very similar ones. So, taking a photo that you like of yourself and cropping everybody else out of it is not the answer. It's also probably important at this point to understand how different personality styles take in different information. So if we talk about disc profiling, the reality is that, high Ds who are very goal-driven, so dominant personality types, they're going to be more interested in just a good, competent person who can do the job that they need done. So when they see photos of you, for argument's sake, with your family, or it's not, very professional, they're automatically going to discount you internally on a subconscious level. So yeah, a good corporate headshot shouldn't be any more than 2 years old. And for the women who are listening in today, or the men for that matter, if you're in the habit of routinely changing your hair color, it's important that the photo is actually congruent with what you look like currently, because often if you're taking meetings out in cafes or anywhere else, then generally speaking, people will go to your LinkedIn profile photo to work out whether they've found the right person. So just bear that in mind. The other thing that they say is that a squinch or a slight squint increases the perception of competence and influence. So what that just means is basically if you slightly squint your eyes, it makes you seem more approachable and more competent. So the other conundrum that we have with LinkedIn is that 92% of business-to-business buyers engage with sales professionals if they're thought to be industry leaders. So what I mean by that is you want to make sure that you're routinely writing articles and posting them on your LinkedIn profile that speak to the problems that you solve for your clients and for your stakeholder groups. And so there needs to be a strategic framework in terms of the types of content that you create, because those articles can then sit on your LinkedIn profile permanently. It's like an embedded blog, and it gives new connections an opportunity to assess you from that thought leader or industry leader perspective, which can be quite important. Equally important, it's good to understand that anything that you engage with on LinkedIn, whether you like a post or you comment on a post or you share it, it goes into your activity feed. So when I'm making my mind up about someone who's sent me a connection request on LinkedIn, the first thing I'll do is go to their activity feed. These are some real life examples taken from LinkedIn. So the one on the left, that gentleman posted a thing about men being in the office faster than women because women need to do their makeup. You can see I was less than impressed by that. But equally importantly, he had more than 54 comments on this thread, and he hadn't responded to any of them. So you can't have your LinkedIn profile set on automatic pilot and not monitor it, because you're asking for trouble. Now, the one on the right is probably even more concerning. So my general manager, Tamara, had the top photo on the right come up in her newsfeed. So she went through to the gentleman's profile who's blocked out, to see who in God's name she was connected to and why this kind of content was coming up in her LinkedIn feed. And so then the second example on the below right was the second thing that he'd done. I use these because they're really obvious examples, but the reality is that you just want to make sure that the content that you're engaging with, or that your staff are engaging with, is congruent with the way that you would like the organisation positioned, that it demonstrates knowledge and understanding of the industry vertical or the products and services that you provide, and you're not engaging with things that create psychological bumps in terms of doesn't quite fit, doesn't quite make sense. Okay, so I'm going to go to the social selling index now. So to do that, I'm going to get out of here. See if we can get this right. Okay, so on LinkedIn itself, if you've opened up a tab for yourself, then what you'll find is if you open up a second tab and just Google social selling index, LinkedIn. Okay, and then you'll see this one here, the social selling index SSI is what it is that you actually want to go to. So if you click on the social selling index LinkedIn sales solutions, and it will come up, just let the screen load. Okay, so then it will come up with an opportunity for you to get your score for free. So if you click on get your score for free, then what LinkedIn will do is it will tell you what your social selling index is. And it's important not because it's going to let you know whether you're fantastic at sales necessarily, but what it does tell you is it gives you the 4 different scores for establishing your professional brand, for finding the right people, engaging with insights, and building relationships. And that's important because it will give you an idea of how fleshed out your profile is. So I'm just going to close some screens, see if this will help it load for you guys a little bit better. So that's how you get your social selling index score. If you go then back to LinkedIn itself, once you've written down your scores, because it's really just for your own benefit. And now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about your profile itself. Okay, so if we actually go onto LinkedIn, then the first thing that we want to do is make sure that our profile is optimized. So we click through onto your name and it will bring up the profile itself. Okay, all right, so from here, there's a couple of things to bear in mind that are in the can't hurt, might help basket. Okay, so you'll see here that there's a banner up the top next to my headshot. Now, it's really good if you have a slider image that's taken from your website and that everybody from the company has the same banner image, because really all we're doing is we're saying, yes, you've found someone who's from our organisation. It's quite obvious that that's the case. Now, I don't tend to use our company logo on the banner image because you will find that it will get stretched and cropped in all sorts of interesting ways if you're looking at LinkedIn from a mobile phone versus on a tablet versus on a computer. So I tend to take an image that it doesn't matter if it gets shrunk or not shrunk. From there, we're going to click on the little pencil, which is in the top right-hand side. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different aspects of your profile that you need to be aware of. Okay, so the first thing is your headline. So you'll see here, your headline is actually indexable by Google. Okay, and quite often if your LinkedIn profile is correctly optimized, then you'll find that people will find you in search results through Google. They'll find your profile faster than they'll often find the website. So your headline should contain some keywords. So just like search engine optimization, you actually want to make the most of this by containing those keywords. So in my case, you'll see it says social media specialist, trainer, keynote speaker, and strategist. And then it has my different job roles. Okay, so that's the way that I recommend that you structure that. Then we move down to your contact information. So again, kind of important. You want to make sure from that perspective, everyone has their own opinions on this, but you want to at least have the company websites on there. And the reason that we, rather than saying company website, the reason that we select other as the website is because you can actually type then the name of the website that you're sending people to. So the older generations really don't like clicking on links when they don't know where they're going. So rather than saying company website, we say you're going to social media, A-OK. The other thing to bear in mind is with your phone number, again, this comes down to personal choice. You can have the office number or your mobile phone. For me, it's important for me that my connections can get a hold of me if that's what they want to do. I don't tend to find that people are spamming me or talking to me, about selling me things that often. So I have my mobile phone number there, and I have the office address and my work email address. And then you can also add Twitter and whatever else to that. Okay. Now, if we go back, then you get to your summary. Now, your summary is actually an opportunity to position both yourself and the company that you work for. So it's really important. Mine's structured slightly differently because I do a lot of keynote speaking. So mine talks about myself first and the company second. But in an ideal world, what you would do is you would start with 2 to 3 sentences positioning the company. So what is the company all about, and what are the pain points that the company solves for its partners or for its clients? And then you would write 2 to 3 sentences about what you bring to the position you currently hold that is congruent with the positioning statement that you've used for the company. So what is it that you bring to the table effectively? And then because the summary is indexable by Google, then right at the end, under the guise of specialities, this is where you stuff a whole heap of keywords that you actually want to show up for in search results. Okay, and then from there, what you want to do is upload some media. So you can actually upload or link to videos, you can have PDFs or photos. And again, it's just really important to have information that's there that continues to align your personal brand positioning, so what it is that you're actually trying to achieve. Okay, so then once that's all done, just close out of that one for a second. Okay, so from there, we get down to experience. Okay, and in your experience section, the questions that I most often get asked is how much experience is too much experience? So, and in terms of that, what I mean is the older you are, the longer you've been around, the more job roles you've had. So at what point do you actually stop? So generally saying, I suggest that you list your experience up to the last or the first position that you held that could still be relevant to current customers. So if I use mine as an example, we go all the way down here. Okay, so you can see that when I was a venue manager in ALH Group, I don't talk about all of my EBIT performance and what I did and what my job and person specifications were. I just simply say that I was responsible for managing a number of hotels and that I had a successful track record in the areas of business growth, compliance, people development, and culture change. And I do that because that is relevant to my current clients or potential clients, because if I had a history of doing that successfully in 2000 to 2009, then it's reasonable to assume and likely that people will assume on a subconscious level that I have continued to develop those skills over time. So from a sales and personal branding perspective, when it comes down to LinkedIn, what you're actually doing is you're telling a story. So you're telling a story to people of the way that you conduct yourself in business and the skills that you have developed and demonstrated over time that are still relevant to your clients or stakeholders now. Okay, and then you get down to education. So with your education, again, it's important that you list this tends to be any university degrees that you hold, any further qualifications that you've done. Coming back to experience, the other thing is if you are holding any not-for-profit, unpaid board positions or things like that, it's really good to list these under your experience rather than under your volunteering section. Okay, because that kind of experience becomes of interest to influencer type personality styles. Okay, because they're interested in the other people that you've worked with. So the high I's on the disc profile are all about, oh, they've done work with this organisation, I've done work with that organisation. The S type personalities on the disc profile, you will find they get excited because they can see that you're demonstrating social responsibility, which is, again, really quite important. Okay, so then coming back to the training, like I said, you have education section where you can add all of that in, and volunteering experience. And then we get to skills and endorsements. Now, skills and endorsements is an interesting one in that if you're an active user of LinkedIn, you've all been endorsed by someone you've never met for something that you don't actually do. So it's important to understand that skills and endorsements, nobody actually looks at those to decide whether you're any good at anything. They're simply indexing tools for LinkedIn search results. And so what I mean by that is basically you're telling LinkedIn what it is that you want to show up for. So if you click on the little pencil to edit that, you can actually delete skills that are not applicable. Okay, and you can also reorder the skills to make different ones more important. So if you need to delete them, you just click on the little rubbish bin, or you can drag and drop them up in a different order and save it. So again, from that perspective, what you actually want to look at is it's more about, from a personal branding, from an organisational perspective, it's more about demonstrating scope and scale of an organisation and what they do. So it's not just about the little things that you do within an organisation, it's about what the organisation does as a whole. So if they provide employment solutions, you'd put that in there. If they provided, community housing projects, then you would include those kinds of things. So it's like, what keywords would you want to come up in search results for? All right. Okay, and then we get to recommendations. So recommendations, there's no such thing as too many. And it's one of those things that you want to make the most of. So the best time to ask for a recommendation is within 24 hours of delivering on a project, when you're still at the top of somebody's list in terms of, them being really happy with the work that you delivered. And it's also important that you give them an idea of what it is that you're looking for. Okay, so for argument's sake, so if we look at Armando's one here, okay, so again, I delivered a lecture for him, and then when I sent him the recommendation request, I said, Hi Armando, just wondering if you can spare a brief 2 minutes to help me out. Just looking for a couple of sentences about how you found the content and my delivery for the workshop that I held for you. Thanks in advance. Okay, so what I'm basically doing when I change that is I'm activating the helping part of his brain, for starters, because I've asked him for help rather than a recommendation. I've told him that it's only going to take 2 minutes of his time and that I don't want war and peace. I just want a couple of sentences. And the other thing that I am looking for is I'm basically giving him some idea of what it is that I'm looking for. So if he's a really busy person, he's more likely to take time out of his day because I've given him some guidance around that. Okay, and it also allows you to flesh out your LinkedIn profile in such a way that you're social proofing, because you've got a significant number of recommendations on your profile. Okay, so that being said, if we go, I'm just going to go back to the home screen for a minute. I'll see if I've got someone in here. Okay, so if you know that there's somebody that you want a recommendation from, okay, so you click on their name, just for those of you that may not have done this before. Okay, so the person that you want a recommendation from, once you've clicked on their name, just waiting for the screen to load, then you click on the More box, okay? So there's a More box next to the message box just under there, and then you'll be able to see Request a Recommendation. The other thing is that there's an opportunity here to recommend people. So when you work with a number of different organisations on a project, one of the best things that you can do is sit down and put together a recommendation to say thank you to the people who have supported you on that project. So what you'll find is people are increasingly disconnected and increasingly unseen and unheard in today's world. And so if you're sending someone an unsolicited recommendation, not only are you making their day, but you're putting yourself in front of them as somebody who sees them and hears them, and that's a really powerful place to be. So it's good to consider that from that aspect. I'm going to go back now to the profile. All right, so like I said, you want to spend a good amount of time fleshing out all of your profile or your online dating profile for business. And then once you've done all of that, and you can see there's a whole heap of accomplishments here that you can add. So accomplishments are things like case studies of projects that you've worked on. Certifications are certifications that you or the organisation holds. So if you're ISO accredited, things like that. Honours and awards are, again, honours or awards where you or the company has been a finalist or has won. And then you have organisations. So organisations that you hold memberships in are particularly important because it talks to whether it's ongoing professional development, whether it's that you understand their industry. So if you're an associate member of, the construction industry organisation or the housing industry association or something, then when you're looking to do work in that area, you have slightly more credibility when you're taking those meetings because you're a member of what it is. If you've been published, so that's like peer review journals or things like that, articles, those kinds of things, then it's really good to include those too. And then by the time you've done all of that, your profile should be pretty fleshed out. And from that perspective, then you're actually ready to start building your networks. So there are lots of different ways to go about that. Some of the most important things to do is to start by doing your research. So if I typed in here, let's say, I don't know, I wanted to do more work with the Adelaide Airport. Oops, helps if I could spell today. Adelaide Airport Limited. All right, but I don't know anyone in there, so I need to figure it out. So I start by searching for their company page. Once I've found their company page, then you can see here on the right-hand side, I can see all 133 employees. So if I click on that, anybody that's working there that's connected to or is using LinkedIn and has said that they're working there is going to come up on the thing. So you can see here that we've got Sarah and Kim Elder, who's the commercial manager. So then all of a sudden I start to get a feel for who it is that I need to talk to or the job titles that I need to talk to. So let's pretend that John Pierce, who's the head of retail and commercial, is ideally who I can talk to. So if I click through to have a look at his profile, I can see there that I've got 30 mutual connections, okay, which is quite a few. So then if I click on those mutual connections, if it's important to me that I can get this introduction with John, then I would look through my mutual connections and see who it is that I know well enough that I can ring them. Don't message them. Pick up the phone and ring them and ask them whether they can facilitate that introduction for me. The other thing that I may well choose to do, maybe I don't have enough connections or I don't have a strong enough connection with someone, I might just send him a connection request then and go, hi, John, LinkedIn put you up as someone I might know. We haven't actually met, but I'm always expanding my professional network. More than happy to connect if you like. Feel free to ignore if not. Have a great day. So I tend to be quite cheeky with that kind of stuff. I've got no problem asking someone to connect with me. The other thing that I tend to look at too is if we go back to my network, or actually to home. Okay, so from here, we can see who's viewed your profile. Okay, so if I click on who's viewed my profile, which is underneath like my name. Okay, so now I can see all of the people who have been viewing my profile. Now, this is where premium comes in handy. So I have premium LinkedIn just so that I can see exactly who's viewed my profile and when. And the reason for that is pretty simple in that if I have a quote or a proposal with someone and they've been looking at my profile, that's a really good time for me to pick up the phone and have a conversation with them and see if they have any questions. So it gives me a cue. If it's someone that's looked at my profile that I don't have a connection with, then, you know, I may well send them a message again, not saying LinkedIn told me you were stalking me, but I would say LinkedIn put you up as someone I might know. So I would use the same script that I was talking about earlier. Okay, and if it's someone that's looking at my profile that I do have a connection with, but I haven't caught up with them for ages, then it's a good cue for me to send them an email and just go, you popped into my head this week, what are you up to? Because quite often that will kick up an opportunity because they're looking at things for a reason. So a lot of inbound sales inquiries or inbound opportunities have been created simply by paying attention to who's looking at my profile and who's not. So that becomes quite important. And the last thing that I want to cover before we kind of open off to questions is some of your settings. So if you click on your head up the top and go into settings and privacy, there are a few key settings that you probably need to be aware of. Okay. So you'll see that under privacy, there's a spot where you can select who can see your connections. Now I have that set so that only I can see my connections. So if you go onto my LinkedIn profile to have a look, what you'll find is that you might be able to see mutual connections that we've got, but you won't be able to see any connections that I have that are not shared connections. And I do that because I don't really want people trawling through my profile, growing their own networks. It's really not what it's there for. The other thing that I do is I manage, where's it gone? viewers of this profile also viewed is the other one that I change. Okay, so again, if someone's coming and looking at my profile, I don't then want LinkedIn to go, and you need to go and talk to Simone's competitor X and Simone's competitor Y. Okay, so that's what that is. If you have this turned on, then little boxes underneath your profile will say viewers of this profile also viewed CEO from company X and CEO from company Y. Okay, so once you've kind of set all of that up and you go into the communications tab on your settings, you'll be able to limit the amount of emails that LinkedIn is sending you, so it'll be less disruptive to your workflow. And then it comes down to having a strategy for how you use LinkedIn on a daily basis. So I personally spend about 10 minutes twice a day just checking my newsfeed, checking who's changed jobs, because I'll get notifications about someone's updated to a new role, and then also having a look at who's viewed my profile and whether or not I need to make those connections. The other thing that LinkedIn is really powerful for me is when I need help with something, it's much quicker for me to ask LinkedIn to let me know who they would recommend. So a great example, I was doing a business masterclass group that I'm putting together, and I said, who's the best strategic advisor that you've got in Adelaide that could come present to a group of 10 business owners on goal setting? So within 15 minutes, I had 15, 20 different recommendations, and 5 of those people had reached out to me to organise coffee, which meant I didn't have to do any of the legwork. So the more connections that you have on LinkedIn and the more you use it in that way, the more powerful it becomes. So in the beginning, it takes a lot of time to flesh out your profile, but then you'll find after that initial bout of time, it's really only 10, 20 minutes a day, and then maybe an hour once a month to write an article that you want to put up on your profile. On that note, I'm going to hand back over to Tina for questions. So if you guys have any questions, now would be a good time to type those into your question box.
Thanks, Simone. We do have a few questions that have come through. The first one is asking whether the LinkedIn profile can be linked across to other social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter.
It can't. You can post multiple places if you're using a scheduling tool like Hootsuite or Social Report or one of those, but yeah, it can't be linked to automatically post.
Okay. Someone else has also asked if they should publish their blog posts on the LinkedIn profile, personal or the actual organizational profile.
Yeah, good question. So the way that we do it in our organisation, the way that I recommend is that you take 2/3 of your blog post and put it as an article on your personal profile, or on the personal profile of the person who wrote the blog, with a link back to the blog post itself to read the post in full. And then share that article from your personal profile onto the LinkedIn company page. And I also encourage all of my staff to share the article from my personal profile as well.
Okay. Another person has asked what your thoughts are on an approach if you work for more than one company or have more than one business. For example, in your summary, which should be promoted or both?
So it's a really difficult question, because the summary is one of those things people aren't going to look usually past the first 2 to 3 sentences. So for me, like, I have multiple divergent business interests. So I have the 2 most important ones are in my headline, so that it's easy for people to see that I'm connected to both those businesses. But my summary is very much about the main business, which is social media AOK, and there's only a snippet that says is also the publican at the Duke of Brunswick. So I think it depends where you're focused and what you're trying to achieve. But listing both of them is kind of important too from a transparency perspective, so that it's congruent with what you're putting out in the marketplace.
Okay. Now, This one's asking, as not-for-profit organisations, do you suggest that we use LinkedIn as a tool to encourage donations for our organisation?
So I'm a big fan. Well, donations, yes, but more from the perspective of I like to call them community partnerships because I think it's just more approachable word. So I think it's absolutely okay for people in that business development fundraising space to reach out to people saying we have an opportunity for a community partnership. Is that something that would be of interest to you? But you have to build that relationship first. You can't just, like if someone sent me that as opposed to sending me a thing going, wondering if you'd be interested in catching up for coffee, you're going to get less cut through. So again, it's about taking the time to build the relationship. But that's what it's there for. Everyone's there to do business. So if you are structuring your approach in a way that it's quite clear what's in it potentially for me, and it's not a hard sell, then I'm going to be more open to it.
Okay. Is LinkedIn a good tool to get volunteers and also for job adverts?
Absolutely. So I don't advertise any of my position vacancies anymore using Seek or anything like that. I literally write a blog post about the vacancy, post it on LinkedIn, get it shared across, and also post it on Facebook. And generally speaking, I find the right applicants because it's not what's the word out. It's not being thrown up in front of anyone that wants a job. It's in front of a very deliberate market. And likewise, from a volunteer perspective, you've got highly engaged individuals on LinkedIn. So you're attracting people who have a vested interest.
Yep. Okay. Someone has also asked, have you got any idea how to gain admin access to a company page when an old admin has left or is unknown? I've tried contacting LinkedIn, but they've not been very helpful.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to then attempt to message the person that was admin. You should be able to see who's an admin on the page. Um, but the last time that we had to do that, which was quite some time ago, I'll be honest, for a client, it took multiple contacts to LinkedIn, and we ended up having to send through business registration details and all sorts. So it's not a quick fix.
Okay. They've written that they can't see who the admin is, unfortunately.
Oh, I'll just hold on and let me see if I can find an example. All right. Just bear with me 2 seconds. Yeah, it used to be that you could actually see who it was that was administering. But yeah, it looks like that's not a thing anymore. So LinkedIn contacting the help desk is probably your only hope at this point, I would have said.
Okay. Someone has also asked, how often should they update their profile on LinkedIn?
So you should be having some kind of activity, which is like whether it's sharing an article or something like that, probably once a week is adequate. It's not like Facebook or elsewhere where you need to be on there every day. So it's about quality over quantity. So once a week is perfectly fine in terms of sharing an article or an opinion or something. Actually updating your profile, you want to health check your profile at least once a quarter and make sure that it's current and that all of your links are working and things aren't out of date.
Yep. Okay. And one final question.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn has free profiles and premium ones. What do you
Yeah.
suggest should be used?
So I have premium because I'm responsible for sales and business development. So that means that I can see exactly who's looked at my profile, and I have more advanced features and functionality. Sales Navigator is like another version of that, which I only really recommend for someone who is going to spend half their time on a computer using it to generate leads. But for most people, the free version is perfectly adequate. It's just about using it effectively.
Okay, great. So that's all for questions for now. Was there anything that you wanted to add, Simone, before I finish off?
No, well, yeah, all I would say is that what's important to do is, go away and actually flesh out your profile, schedule some time in your diaries to do it, because otherwise it doesn't happen. The more confident you get with the interface, the more you'll get out of it. So, yeah, I'd really encourage you to take the time to do that.
Great. Thanks so much, Simone, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've all learnt a lot from this presentation and that all of your questions have been answered. If you do have any questions that come to mind later or any feedback about the webinar, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we'll be able to answer those questions offline. Don't forget that the recording will be available and a link will be sent to you through email, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, Simone.
No worries. Thanks.